Welcome back, everyone. We have a great guest. We have our metal queen, Lee Aaron. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Nice to be here.
It's nice to have you here. You're about to release your 16th studio record. How has your approach, writing and recording changed over the years?
The album that I'm about to release is called Tattoo Me,
Hmm.
and it is my first album. It's of covers, actually.
Yeah.
So it's the first album of covers that I've ever done, and that's a great question. How has my approach changed? Well, I try to look at each album as an entity unto itself, and each album is a new adventure. you know,
Yeah.
um, and so for this latest album, the guys in the band and I were sitting around having dinner one night, and we're like, "What are we going to do for our next project?" And because I have written and recorded about 15 studio albums,
Hmm.
the idea of doing a covers record came up. I'd never done one before, and we thought it would be really fun to go find some material that had been influential to all of us as we were young aspiring musicians, but also things that continued to be inspirational for us over the years as we continued on with our music careers, because none of us stopped being a fan when we were 15. We kept being fans of music, and I'm consistently being listening to new stuff and being inspired, and yeah, and so that's kind of how this latest album came about.
And for you guys, you said you sat down and you guys decided who you guys kind of wanted to cover. For you, which one meant the most to you that you chose?
um yeah, a few of the two, well, probably some of the female artists that I
Mm.
gravitated towards. Back when I started singing hard rock, there were literally almost no women doing it. There was Joan Jett, myself. Again, Joan Jett's a bit older than me, and she
Mhm.
was very influential to me as well. But um, so at the time when I started doing this, I was a huge Heart fan.
Mm.
Loved what Ann and Nancy Wilson were doing. A Runaways fan, Christy McVie and Stevie Nicks from Fleetwood Mac. So it was important to me to do some covers of some female artists that I respected and admired and were truly influential to me growing up. So there's a cover of Even It Up by Heart on this
Mhm.
album. There's You Go Your Own Way, which is a Fleetwood Mac song. Yes, it's a Lindsay. He sings the lead on that tune, but you definitely, Fleetwood Mac is such an entity. Those female voices um, during their heyday, they're front and center there. Um, we we did a Nina Simone cover. A
Yeah.
lot of people aren't aware that Nina Simone, even though she's a jazz and blues artist, was hugely influential to me. I discovered her in my early 20s. I was in a nightclub in Berlin, and we were all dancing to disco after a show and hanging out, and back in the crazy days. And this came on over the speaker system, and it was Nina Simone. And I was just like blown away. I'm like, who is this? And then I had to go dig deep and find everything she'd done. And to this day, Little Girl Blue and Nina Sings the Blues are a couple of my all-time favorite albums. And so yeah, I did a cover of Nina Simone's Pusher.
Nice.
And
Yeah.
so those three in particular were very important to me to do.
And then I also you did some Hole and you have Led Zeppelin. What did those mean to you?
Well, Led Zeppelin, of course, you know, as a teenager growing up, and I was a huge Zepp fan. And
Mm.
I always credit Robert Plant with being the greatest vocal teacher, because if you can sing early Led Zeppelin, what I loved about his voice was his approach was so bluesy. Um, and I think my voice gravitates to that stylistically. And growing up singing a lot of Led Zeppelin covers, I think it was probably the greatest vocal teacher I could have had.
Oh, yeah.
So it was important to me to do a Zeppelin tune again, but not something that had been done to death. I wasn't going to do
Yeah.
rock and roll. I wasn't going to do a whole lot of love. I wanted to do something a little bit off the beaten path. And what I loved about early Zeppelin was the way to understand Zeppelin. And I know Ann Wilson from Heart has said this. You have to listen to the Zeppelin acoustic stuff as well.
Yeah.
They weren't just a rock band, like a hard rock band. They had this beautiful blend of of soft and heavy. And what I loved about What Is and What Should Never Be, the cover that I put on this record, is it's sort of a quintessential balance of those two elements, the beautiful acoustic stuff, and then the launching into the heavy riffing stuff with Jimmy Page. And so I love doing that. And then you were talking about the whole cover that we did. I loved 90s music as well. And, the 90s were a difficult and challenging time for many, many of us artists that were considered, say, classic rock or hard rock. When grunge hit the airwaves, the media and the radio kind of did an about face, and they didn't want to really support a lot of artists that they considered, and I hate even to use the term hair metal, right? But they didn't want to support artists like us anymore. But that didn't stop me from really loving a lot of that music and being influenced by it. In fact, I did in the 90s, I did Some Girls Do. I did the Emotional Rain record. I moved to the West Coast. I did an entire alt rock record called Too Precious, with guys from Canada they were a band called Sons of Freedom. So I feel like I still did a lot of my favorite artistic work in the 90s, even if it wasn't as commercially successful. And I was very influenced by Nirvana and, of course, Hole. Yeah. I thought Courtney Love was a talent to be reckoned with. And I loved both of those early Hole records. So when my guitar player, Sean Kelly, said, what about doing Malibu? I was like, oh, yes, let's do it. I loved that song. I loved that album. And unlike a lot of 70s and 80s rock, the Malibu is a very popular song for them, but it has not been covered to death. Yeah. Like a lot of those 80s and 70s and 80s covers, right?
I agree with your choice of your list of songs. You didn't pick the overly popular. You picked some of like the underrated ones that deserve more love. And I feel like with this record, they'll get that love,
Well, thank you. I that was sort of my modus operandi when I was choosing songs, was not to do things that had been overdone. And of course, during when we started recording and we were in the middle of picking the songs that we wanted to do for this album, Dolly Parton announced that she was doing a covers record called Rockstar. And I'm like, oh, because at one point in time we were considering covering Magic Man. Yeah. And then she announced that she would be doing not only a duet with Ann Wilson, but she was covering Magic. I'm like, okay, dang, guess that one's off the table. So, I had to kind of rethink what I was doing. Dolly, of course, did the most popular, most commercial hits of all of those artists, and duets with all of them to boot. So, we had to sort of, we veered off the beaten path a little bit and tried to shed some light on some songs that, again, like you said, deserve some love.
Yeah. That was crazy when she announced that. And then I know you released a record in 2022. So when did you start recording and picking songs for this record?
So Elevate, you're correct about that. Elevate came out in December of 2022. Basically, while we were on tour for Elevate, we started talking about our next project. And that's probably how it will work again. I don't know, I feel like I'm having a little bit of a creative renaissance in my life, in my career right now. And, we're heading out on the road this summer to tour Tattoo Me. But we're already talking about what our next project is going to be. I have it all mapped out in my head.
That makes sense. And you're talking about touring in the summer. How do you guys go about making a set list? Because you have such a huge catalog.
That's a great question. And in fact, I just got asked that question in another interview. And I'll say this, the more albums you have, the harder it gets, because I couldn't just go out and play Tattoo Me, because I'd have people in the front row going, Metal Queen, and where's What You Do to My Body? And they, the reality is, I started recording very young. I did my first album when I recorded at 18, put it out when I was 19. So I have a lot of history under my belt, as a touring and recording artist. I've been doing this for 40 plus years, and I think Tattoo Me is probably my including best ofs and live albums, my 19th album. So with that said, uh, people want to hear, a lot of people come out that are, my fans are between 45 and 65, and they want to hear nostalgia. Like, and that's a beautiful thing. Don't take that the wrong,
Yeah.
don't look at that in the wrong light. It's a beautiful thing. People will come up to me and go, oh, I met my husband at one of your concerts, and What You Do to My Body, it's our song. And there's a lot of love and a lot of nostalgia attached to playing your older hits.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing. And I want to share that experience with my audience. So I love going out and playing Metal Queen and What You Do to My Body and Hands On and Only Human. And those need to be a part of my set. It's important. But I also have a lot of real dedicated fans that follow my career really closely, that go and they buy. I mean, I still can get a record deal at this age because they know that I'm going to sell a certain number of physical product, that there's some money to be made there, because my fans, they love CD and they still love vinyl, and they want to hear Fire and Gasoline. They want to hear Rock Bottom Revolution from Elevate, the single, because they're following along with my new stuff. So my set right now kind of consists of half old, half new, and all the singles. And I feel honestly really fortunate and very, very blessed that I'm able to even do that, because a lot of my contemporaries, they can only play old material.
Yeah.
So I feel really blessed that I'm able to go out and do that. I really do.
What's cool is like with the releasing this, they're gonna feel the nostalgia too, like live, because they're older songs, but they're really cool songs that everyone loves, So that's cool too.
Well, I hope so. Yes, for sure.
And then, so you have released 16 records. What keeps you motivated as a musician?
What keeps me motivated? Being a fan. I'm also a fan of music and of new music. I got an 18-year-old son, and he's like, "Mom, you got to listen to this band called Bass Drum of Death," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Or, he's constantly turning me on to new things, as well as my daughter. She loves music as well. We're a very musical family, so I'm constantly hearing things that I'm inspired by, things that give me ideas, and I go, "Ooh, man, I want to do a song with that groove for my next record," and yeah. So, and also just I think being a parent, one of the questions I got asked frequently was, "Do you feel like you lost your edge because you're like a mom now?" And I'm like, in fact, not at all. I find that once you become a parent and you are raising children, and you are in a, you're watching the world under almost like a microscope, because you want your children to be able to grow up in a world that, well, is an environmentally friendly place to live in the future, is politically a friendly place to live in the future, a peaceful place. And there's so much, environmental damage and turmoil going on in the world. And that's been, a source of inspiration for me. The feelings that I have around that, like Rock Bottom Revolution, was completely inspired by the state of the world and the, politically what was going on in America at the time. And, I'm constantly drawing on feelings and things like that for inspiration and things to write about.
That makes sense. And with someone that's been in the industry for quite a while, how have you learned to adapt over the years?
So that's a great question. Probably the biggest adaptation has been the advent of digital technology, right?
Yeah.
So nobody makes albums anymore because expecting to actually make any money off them. It used to be that years ago you could make a record and not even tour, and you could still, make somebody rich, your record company or yourself. And the record industry has kind of fallen apart. It is no longer the big corporate money making machine that it used to be. It's no longer that. So when you make records, you need to they're kind of like an advertisement for your live show. They're going to end up on streaming platforms, and that's okay. That's not really why I make records. I make records for the artistic gratification of doing it, because I know my fans like to hear new music, and also because it propels Lee Aaron to continue to keep going forward and to be able to play live. So yeah, I've had to adapt. I've had to learn to navigate my way around social media, which is, if I don't know how to do anything, if I get stuck, I just ask my 18-year-old, how do I do this? Because the thing about these social media platforms is they're constantly changing, how you do this or how you do that, or and the analytics, behind the scenes. So I've had to adapt and learn how to use social media and, over the last decade. But I mean, it's also a fun way to connect with your fans on a personal level as well. So that's kind of a cool thing. The other thing about digital technology, which is a good thing, is that it's made making albums infinitely less expensive than it used to be. So I have a home studio, and Tattoo Me was made entirely just in-house with the band. Myself. I produced it myself. I have a wonderful mixer in Toronto. I sent it to him, and we just send files around and make it happen. My favorite way to still make records is to go into a real studio with a real band, and Elevate and Radio On were both made that way, where we recorded all our band tracks live off the floor. Then we brought them back home to do the overdubbing. But, so the digital world has made it really easy to do records. And I love working in Logic Pro X because it's, I think compared to Pro Tools, it's a real artist tool, because there's a lot of in-house software instruments in that platform. And it's like a creative powerhouse. I love working in it.
And I was reading that you did make a home studio. How often do you record in it?
Well, every time I'm getting ready to make a record, I'm usually either demoing. I'm probably, I go through very focused periods of time of being in my studio. And then right now I'm not in it at all, because I'm doing interviews. I'm in the promo stage now of promoting the record. But yeah, I've even gotten good with, believe it or not, I have a gigantic green screen at my house, and I'm able to convert one of my rooms into a green screen studio and do filming here for video as well, and then send it to my video guru, Frank Greiner in Toronto. So it's amazing what you're able to do with digital technology right now, if you're willing to take the time to learn how to do it. And I'm always up for a new challenge. So, hey.
That's pretty cool though. Like, you're into producing your own records now. That's pretty, like, a lot of people aren't into that yet. So that's pretty cool to see that.
Well, I'm a real believer that knowledge is power. And the more that you are able to learn and do on your own, the more power you have over your art and over your career and over your marketing and everything, And I come from the era. I came up in the era of really having so little control over any of that stuff, because, I'd just show up for a photo session, and then a bunch of pictures would get taken, and I'd go to the label, and I might choose the pictures that were my favorite, but ultimately the record label owned those photographs, and they decided what they were going to use for marketing. And so it's a completely different world. I've tried to create, I have my own label, Big Sister Records. It's a boutique label, and I'm sort of the creative powerhouse behind that. I create all of the creative elements, my album covers, the artwork, the video footage, the videos, I make them. I have certain subcontractors that I love to use. And once those creative elements are done on my Big Sister Records imprint, then I license it to licensees around the world. So right now I have the last few albums I've done with a label out of Germany called Metalville Records. They're a fantastic label. They have fantastic distribution around the world. So I'm on Orchard Sony in the US. I'm on Ward Records in Japan. I'm on Rough Trade all throughout Europe. And in Canada, I carved out Canadian distribution is a separate company. It's called Propaganda, and I'm on them in Canada. And so I'm telling you a little bit about the business side. I mean, it's probably not interesting, but
no, it's all interesting. I mean, if you're doing all of it. You're not just the singer. You're doing it all, which is cool. Like not every band does that. Most, oh, I'm gonna join Metal Blade. Oh, I'm gonna join Nuclear Blast. You know, you're yourself. You do all of it. That's cool.
well, I find that the more that you're able to do on your own independently, um, at least 100%. I'm not going to be, mortified because there's a photo out there or a single release
Yeah.
that I didn't agree with, or and again, coming from the early 80s when I started, when women really had no control over how they were marketed and put out there, I guess it's a little bit of a bone of contention for me. At this stage of my life and career, I just want to fully be in charge of all that stuff. So, yeah.
And with you talking about like, because we're talking about you had no control, what advice would you give women in the industry nowadays?
Um, don't copy, be authentic. It's one thing to be influenced by artists, but it's another thing to copy. Learn, like I say this so many times, learn music software. Take the time to learn some music software, to create a drum loop, to be able to record yourself, to put your ideas down, to put the true you down, the authentic you. I think it's such an important tool to be able to do that. And yeah, don't, take that. You get offered a record contract, go take it to a lawyer, find out exactly what you're signing, what you're giving away, what you're trading. Because as the record industry has declined, the surviving large labels out there often want what is called a 360 deal, which never existed in the 80s, even though the 80s they took all your money as well. But it didn't. These 360 deals, they want a piece of your merchandising, because that is really how we make money these days as artists, is touring live and selling merchandise from this, after your show. But these 360 deals, they want a piece of your merch, they want a piece of your live show. And these are not things that I have agreed to give away, the way that I have my business structured now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then what advice would you give your younger self?
that's a great question too. My younger self, trust your gut. There were so many times when I was young and I just went like, this doesn't feel really great. And then I did it anyway and went, dang, I just really regret those red spandex shorts, And I should have trusted my gut. I should have believed in myself. But it still is to some degree, a very male dominated industry. But it, 1,000 times more so in the 80s. And and I say this, a lot of the artists that started out like myself, Doro Pesh, just trying to think, that there were, Lita Ford, maybe. There were so few of us doing hard rock back then as women. And we had to really claw and fight and scrap our way for every bit of credibility and respect we had. And it was a long road, but it's so beautiful now. And even in the 90s, suddenly there was Alanis, there was Courtney Love from Hole, there was Shirley Manson from Garbage, there was, the Pixies and the Breeders and all of these 90s women. Suddenly, when in the 80s, when we were angry girls doing hard rock, and we had a bone to pick, we had something to say. Metal Queen is a true song about feminist empowerment, but we got treated kind of like cute little poster girls, and that were there for, how do I explain it? That were treated kind of like novelty artists, but it blew wide open in the 90s. And suddenly it was okay for a woman to pick up a guitar and have something angry to say, like Alanis is a perfect example, and be treated with respect. And I'd love to think like we broke down some of those doors for artists like that.
I think so.
And the beautiful thing now is it's pretty common to see women in hard rock bands. You've got, Evanescence and Nightwish and I mean, there's just slews of them now, and
Oh, yeah.
Burning Witches and Serena Telly, and just you know, that's such a great thing. It's now become commonplace that women can just get up there and do it, and nobody bats an eye.
I agree. And you're naming all these awesome artists. Do you have a dream tour lineup you would love to happen with you?
That's well, yeah. For me, it would be a special place in my heart if I got to tour with some like Joan Jett and Hart. Honestly, like artists that I grew up loving as well. Um, that would be an amazing thing for me. Um, yeah. So yeah, I guess I'm kind of going a little bit backward, but to
Okay.
be on tour with artists that I really respected and grew up loving. Yeah.
That's a really cool lineup. And one of my questions I'd love to ask. So you're to me, you're one of the known factors in the women, like with women in the industry. What would you consider your Mount Rushmore of female vocalist?
My Mount Rushmore of female vocalists.
Yes.
Um, boy, oh boy. I'm gonna go back. I'm in time here. Janis Joplin.
Hell yeah.
I'm talking about women that came before me, right? Uh, Ann Wilson, Nina Simone. I know she's not a hard rock artist, but I think she's just an incredible artist. Um, oh boy. Yeah, I mean, I maybe not pick everybody in rock, like Aretha Franklin, you know, just incredible, incredible. Do I need one more? Is that enough?
I mean, that's enough for me. That's like basically covers almost everything. And for someone listening to Leanne for the first time, what 3 songs would you suggest them to listen to?
Um, well, probably my hits. What You Do to My Body, um, is pretty quintessential Lee Aaron.
Mhm.
Uh, Metal Queen.
Metal Queen's everything.
Yeah.
I love that song.
um, Hands on. But I would also add a fourth in there, and I would say one of my favorite songs that I've ever written and recorded is a song called 21, and it's from the Radio On album. And it's it just shows that beautiful, softer side of Lee Aaron that I think is an important part of what I do. What I loved about early Heart and early Zeppelin is they managed to balance that emotional, tender, acoustic, soft side with those really heavy riffs and the bluesy, wailing vocals, and that to me is part of a trademark Lee Aaron as well. So
Awesome.
yeah.
That's a good set of songs right there. And where can everyone keep up with you and buy your new record, Tattoo Me?
So if you go to leeaaron.com, that is my official website, you can connect to all my socials from there. You can also connect to buy links from there. But if you want to just go to, so a lot of people don't go to websites anymore, but if you go to Lee Aaron Music on Facebook, or leeaaron.music on Instagram, in my link tree, in my bio, there are connection links for places to buy the album all around the world. And it's out now. Pre-sales are out now. The official album drops on April 26th. Our first single came out last Friday, Tattoo Me. Our next single, Even It Up, drops on April 5th. And yeah, I'm excited.
I'm excited for you. I'd like to thank you for being on my show.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Well, we're going to end the show. See you guys next interview.